Hello and welcome back to the Franchise Growth Podcast. My name is Belle, Director of Marketing here at AC Inc., and I'm here with a brand new guest on the show. I am so excited he's on. He has been on the team for, I think, a year now, and I'm not sure why on earth we haven't had you on before because I work super, super closely with this person on all things AC operations. And so, welcome to the show, Aidan. Woo!
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. And I can't believe it's been just about a year I've been with AC now. So I'm surprised, but I'm honored to be here now.
Oh my gosh, yay. I adore having you on the team. It's been so fun. Aiden and I do all the big projects like the building of the Academy platform
Mhm.
and um, all the behind the scenes of all the resource development, which is what we're going to talk about today. And he is just such a rock star of the team and such a backbone of so much of what you see on the outside in terms of our services. So it is such a pleasure to have you on the show. And we're going to start off actually with you telling us a little bit about your background because so it's been almost a year on the team with AC, but I know you have lots of other things you're working on and a really cool background in like franchising and business and kind of what you're interested in. So let's start with just a little dive into what brought you here, what you're doing now, and go.
Okay. So to start, I am AC Inc.'s operations support specialist. That's where I currently am.
Hmm.
But my history is actually in pet retail, is kind of where I started, and kind of what ignited my passion for business. Is I was a store manager for a corporate location for a pet retail brand. Worked as a store manager for a while, had a great team there. Eventually moved to become a loss prevention operations analyst at
Hmm.
head office, then became a field operations manager as well at head office. So climbed that corporate ladder in the pet retail industry, which was a great time. It's a lovely industry to be in.
Sure.
Um, but a lot of my time at head office was working on analyzing the company's current standard operating procedure document for corporate stores. So that operations manual was used by like over 250 corporate locations in Canada, and I was helping to analyze it and see where improvements could be made to really better support our stores. Another exciting thing I got to do was work with Walt Disney Institutes, which is a company can actually hire them to work with them to improve your customer service model and your core values and create new core values. So I got the opportunity to be a part of that project, which was super exciting. And I learned a whole lot from the way Walt Disney does things, especially operationally, and just how detail oriented they are and how every little detail matters.
And
And then a lot of
that really
oh,
shines through in a lot of the work you do. I have to say, like that background really does make sense. Just in terms of how much you're like really, really passionate on the small side of things, and then how that develops into the bigger picture of the business and how it runs and the success of all the systems, which is again something we're gonna be talking about. So that totally makes sense.
it is. It's all the little details that matter and add up, especially as a really big spreadsheet and data nerd. It's all the little bits that really matter when you're cleaning and sorting through that stuff. And coming from the store manager to head office, I immediately realized the impact that like SOPs had and resources had on the stores. Because you don't really think when you're in the store, like head office will send you stuff and you use it, you don't use it, or you find it's not helpful at all. So I really understood the importance of how developing the proper resource or SOP for stores to use is just so important and so impactful. And then right now I'm in school. I actually found AC Inc. through an IFA job fair through my college. That's
Yeah, yeah.
originally how I met Jen Brannon. And so I'm pursuing my diploma in business administration and will hopefully pathway to getting my bachelor's in business management as well eventually. So
Okay,
that is
cool.
me.
I love it. And yeah, your journey, I am so impressed with how much you do for this team while being in school and working towards the diploma right now. But yeah, it's been really fun to like talking about university and doing the balance of work and school. It's such a limbo. And it's been really fun chatting with you about that. Maybe we'll get into that in our next episode too. That'd be fun. So we kick off all of our podcast episodes with a little icebreaker. if you're new listening, our team is obsessed with this or that questions or funny icebreakers. If you join our roundtables, we're kind of all about them. So we do one at the beginning of every show. This one is a really simple, just this or that. Some of them are more like an answer. This is just, do you prefer quiet when you're working or do you listen to something?
100% always listening to something. I
Ooh,
always have
okay.
music playing, always.
And what is a typical music that you would have on when working?
Ooh, I'm a big Apple Music fan, so Apple Music has a chill mix that
Mhm.
rotates every week, so I listen to that all the time. And I'm a big folk music fan. It's kind of relaxing, but still is kind of an upbeat, energetic vibe
Yeah.
to it. So I find it's nice working music, actually.
I really agree, actually. That would be probably on my answer too. I am also constantly listening to things. I'm a big podcast gal in terms of the listening, but also music. I am like I do love some Noah Kahan in the background, some Wild Rivers. Like you gotta love that type of mood in the background. But I have to say, I don't know if you feel the same with this for certain things. Sometimes like every once in a while, especially with copywriting projects, gotta just have complete silence. My brain just needs to be like focused. So it's like an extreme. Like there's
Hmm.
either always something going all day, and then every once in a while on certain projects, you're like nothing. So there are definitely things where I need to be like just in it and not having anything cool in the background. Did you grow up in a busy household? Like
Um, Not at all. I grew up in a very quiet household, actually the complete opposite.
because that was originally my theory is if both of us grew up with like lots of things happening around us, maybe that's part of like, oh, needing something in the background. But if you grew up in a really quiet household, that's super not the same as my because I've always said because my husband does not he could not listen to anything. He can't do two things at once in that way. And but he grew up in a really quiet house. And so I was like, oh, it must be because that's how you're used to focusing. But then you're just defying my theory.
Well, my brain works really weird. Like I could be watching YouTube or watching a TV show and on my phone and like eating dinner all three at the same time. So it's almost that just constant simulation a little bit where I need to be
Yeah.
working and hearing something going on in the background too. So it's more just like my multitasking,
Mhm.
crazy brain a little bit, I think,
That
needing
does make
that
sense.
stimulation.
That's so funny. Okay, that was a great icebreaker. Great answers. We are going to be talking today all about resource creation for franchise operations teams. So, in the process of coming up with this topic, I knew I wanted to have Aiden on the podcast. He has a wealth of knowledge, as you guys just heard, with his background, all the different types of operations projects he's been involved in, especially things like SOPs, things like resources like how to's or tutorials or holding information strategically in spreadsheets so it can be tracked, and so many awesome things he does for both AC and his background in business. And I knew I wanted to have him on here to talk about resources because Aiden is our go-to guy if we need like a new resource build, something that's like a tool for one of our courses. Aiden is such an incredible asset on those things. So I knew I wanted to have you on to talk about that. But then I was thinking like, for most people who are listening, they're in franchise systems, they're creating resources for franchisees or for members of their team. And so I was thinking, let's talk about the resource creation process, talk about just resources in general, but in the lens of how you would do it. And it's so similar, right? Building them for our team, building them for franchisees. The point is to make them super useful and super I guess, yeah, just useful, like something that can actually be implemented. And so often I think the issue can be that resources are not that useful or they're created and they're there but then people aren't leveraging them, don't know how to use them properly, they're not intuitive in that way. That's kind of the angle we're going to take on the resources today. But let's talk about what resource creation actually looks like. So what types of things are you creating, what is that process kind of looking like, how do you kind of make them in that user friendly way or that intuitive to figure out way? And that's a lot, but we'll just kind of get started in the conversation that way.
Yeah, I guess to start, so I create resources for both internal use and AC, so a variety of trackers, SOPs, stuff like that, even how-to documents on certain platforms we use. But then I also take requests from our advisors, who then get a request from a client, and they're like, "Hey, and we could use your help building this resource so we could help coach our client with it and hope our client can use it."
So very, very similar to the way an operations leader in a franchise system would be making them for internal team use as well
Hmm.
as for franchises. So very, very similar in that way.
Exactly. And I mean, resources can come in like all shapes and sizes,
Mm.
especially with the way technology is involved and the amount of different platforms and tools and stuff that everyone has now. Um, but my main focus is resources as far as like training decks go. I build a lot of presentations,
Mm.
whether it's on how to use resources or assisting with coaching. Lots of Word docs, lots of Google Docs, depending on if you're a Microsoft or Google Suite user. Spreadsheets. I'm a lover of spreadsheets. I
Yeah.
cannot get enough of them. I use them a lot, even in my personal life, just for fun. So lots of spreadsheet trackers, whether that's building a little CRM or a marketing budget planner, or like there's a lot you can do with spreadsheets, and they can be really helpful resources. But to the wrong person as well, they can be intimidating, like you mentioned. Sometimes resources get built and people don't know how to use them, or don't like using them as well. So, but those are some of the main ones that I at least build, and am really confident in the way I build them as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that is kind of what I want to talk about here today. So you do it very similarly to the way that someone in a franchise would be building them and looking at them, is that there's some that's internal or some that's external. We want all of them to be very user friendly. We want them all to be valuable. So we're going to put time into investing in this resource of some kind, especially if we can, use it as maybe a template for other resources in the future, and all those types of all that mindset that goes into it. Let's talk about the making resources useful for their purpose. Like, is there a process you go through in terms of someone needs a resource for their client? Here's what we need it to be like. Do you have kind of a checklist you go through? Do you have, and I know so much of this is often like in our heads, our own processes for this, but if you were kind of going to give a recommendation on like what's the best process for capturing the information you need to then be creating a resource that is actually going to be helpful, actually going to be used, what does that kind of look like? Um, in your day to day.
Um, this is something that, especially at AC, when I work with the advisors to develop resources for clients,
Mhm.
it's discussed a lot because there's such a wide range of business models and business sizes and
Yeah,
client and franchisee personalities as well, that there's not always like a perfect formula for a resource that can be created. Not every resource will perfectly fit every single business.
of course. Yeah.
So I mean, my first go-to is to just understand, one, like what the need is. Like, why are we creating this? What problem, what solution are we trying to solve?
Hmm.
And then I also love attaching to help encourage the franchisees, like, why is this important? What is this going to help improve to your day to day as well?
Mm.
Um, and then I
That's
love
almost
doing,
great. That's almost creating the buy-in ahead of time too. Like if you start with that in turn, because I totally agree. Like the first step being like, what is this actually solving? But then getting like, well, what is that going to do for your business or in the day to day? That's almost helping with the buy-in on the tool right off the bat too. Is kind of getting that feedback right away.
yeah, and I mean that's a big thing. And then as far as ease of use goes, I'm a big fan of pro tips tab, especially if you're doing a spreadsheet or something like that. Just don't throw it at them. Here's a template, start using it. A pro tips or like a step-by-step instruction tab that just helps break it down really simple. And then it's there. If the franchisee doesn't need it, they don't need to worry about it. But for someone who's maybe newer to the system or newer to that technology or resource, it really helps them feel more comfortable with it. Because it does come down to comfortability. Everyone has different technical skills and different technical knowledge. Everyone has different amounts of time available to potentially use that resource too. So it's
Mm.
making it as easy to use as possible, and always thinking, when creating the resource, thinking from the user perspective. I mean, don't just think super high level of like, oh, they need this, they need this, they need this, they need this, because I know they need that. Well, from the user, like, do you really need that? How would you fill that in? How much time do you have in a day to actually do this?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's such a good one. And I actually, it's funny, I hadn't even really thought about it, but you are awesome at the uh like the little extra tab on a spreadsheet that's like, here's how this works. And then it'll kind of outline sometimes in highlighted sections. It'll be like, oh, here's the first step you'd fill in, here's the second thing, here's how often you'd be putting in this information. Like you are really good at having that as an added. And I love how you're looking at it. We're building the template then, and then if we copy it and give it to a franchisee who doesn't need it or is like, oh, I already know how to do this, they can just delete that tab or ignore it or whatever. So it's kind of this extra piece that is super, super helpful if if someone does need to know how to fill in this type of thing. But it's also super easy to get rid of and just
Mhm.
use the basic template if you just want to delete that extra tab.
Yeah, and I mean, it means something to that person who's maybe struggled or intimidated by it to just see that pro tips tab and be like, oh, wait, this doesn't seem so hard, or oh, this is really going to help me talking about the buy-in as well. Of
Yeah.
it helps them get some buy-in as well. It's like, oh yeah, this is easy and this is going to help me, so let's give it a try at least. And
Oh,
that, I mean, that comes from my old experience of like starting as a store manager, like starting at store level and moving to head office and just seeing like the difference that and understanding that the in store or in the business franchisee owner is totally different view of the business than sometimes what head office has, and different
totally.
levels of time and different understanding. So it's always trying to shift your perspective to look from the user's point of view a lot when creating resources will really help create much more effective resources too.
That's such a great point and such a good key takeaway. I'm thinking as someone who might be listening and going, oh my gosh, so many good points, taking it from the actually what is needed, not what I think they need, like all of that. Do you find that the best way to do that is to have an actual conversation with like the coach or the owner, you know, the brand? Like, do you like to get on a Zoom call to talk it through? Do you like to get an email with instructions of like, here's what, or voice? Like, what's the best way to be communicating about these resources? Because all the stuff you've mentioned about the things to be thinking about and that help with the buy-in and help make it more user friendly, that's also key. But how do you like to gather that information? Is there like tips in terms of depends on the type of personality, or is there like a best way to kind of get that info?
My communication style is very flexible, so I'm good with a Zoom call or an email because some people prefer. Sometimes when you get someone on a Zoom call, you can ask them questions and they might forget things or mention or not mention things as well. But in an email, like you can take some time to really type it out and think through what you need. But if I get the chance, I would definitely hop on a call with the field coach or have them send me an email because they know their franchisees best as well.
Yeah.
They know their personality types, they know their technical skills, they know their abilities, they know what's going to help them the best.
Hmm.
And by first understanding, like I said, that problem or solution up front, you can then kind of work backwards from there, being like, okay, I now know where I need to start or what I need to solve, where I need to finish. What kind of information do I need to start gathering from the start? What do they already have? Do they have to input data? Is this just a how-to doc?
Hmm.
And understanding their current level of knowledge and their current availability of data, especially something like a tracker,
Yeah.
and then working from there. So you kind of start at the finish line and then
Mhm.
go back to start and start asking those inter questions of how, like, are they technical? Do they already use this? If there's already comparable resource, are they familiar with it? And
Oh, yeah,
getting
yeah,
an
yeah.
understanding.
I love the comparable resource. That's actually the last question I had on my list was the because it's been awesome. I love the mindset about kind of how you're going into the resource creation, who you'd be wanting to talk to, what type of communication is going to be best, having them be clear also on again the tech knowledge I think is so big on this one. But the last question, I'm just thinking if someone's listening who's on an operations team or on a leadership team, one of the things I know that would be standing out for me is the it's one thing to make like resource creation easier when you're creating new resources. So if you're maybe a smaller brand, maybe only 50 units or something, but if you have a huge library of resources and you're starting to really notice that some franchisees are like, oh, we need this in a different format, or this needs to be updated, or I can't use, you know, if it you're experiencing pushback on some of what you have, are you big on like revising resources? Do you think sometimes it's just about putting resources into different formats, like perhaps a video tutorial, or like is it something where you, in terms of the revision process, because that's I know where a lot of brands are, is that they have some resources, and so when you said comparable documents, I was thinking, oh yeah, so many times like a spreadsheet or a how to or whatever there would be a document that would maybe be similar, like a template of some kind, or a, oh, this has most of the information, but we need to add more because this location has different issues. How do you approach the kind of revision or optimization of like existing resources?
Well, that is a good question. I love refreshing documents. I think it's really important to
Hmm.
try and take some time, at least annually, to
Yeah.
look through your resources because the business will change all the time. And I've had it so many in the past where we think an SOP is right, but it uses different wording or refers to a slightly different tool or refers to another resource that maybe is outdated. So I think a good review of your, especially your standing operating procedures and those resources annually is really important to the business, and to make sure to keep the franchisees updated on them. So whether it's a cloud storage where everyone's got access to a cloud drive and you make sure those are all updated, or if it's sharing new links via email or whatever the process is for just always making sure that the franchisees have the most updated resources, and always going into it with a fresh look. I think every I could write an SOP 3 months ago and then look at it again today and be like, what was I thinking? Or, oh my God, this is totally missing from it. Or, oh my God, this doesn't make any sense. Because I think you get so ingrained in the process, especially when creating a resource or standing operating procedure, that you think it's so great in the moment and you've got everything there. But a fresh set of eyes on it, even a month later, even if it's just you again, you could have a whole new idea of how it could be improved or even be better and better support them, whether it's just some wording changing or shifting around some columns.
Yeah.
So I always am a big advocate for annually at least taking a fresh look at that stuff and seeing where improvements could be made and listening to feedback from the franchisees or field coaches as well.
I love that. That's some really, really solid tips in there in terms of, and I love the proactive approach. As you know, we obviously love proactivity, but I love the proactive approach of kind of having it even in the calendar for your operations team, having someone
Mhm.
going through and kind of, and not necessarily going and completely changing things, but making sure all the steps are involved in the SOPs and making sure if there's new formatting or new branding, even like all that kind of stuff is super, super helpful to be updating a bit more proactively. We are nearing the end of our podcast already, which is crazy. But so many good tips in here, just about kind of the approach of resources, resource creation for teams, for usability. Um, is there anything you want to add before we finish up?
Ooh, oh, I'm a big advocate for flowcharts. That is one
Mhm.
thing I think Belle knows this about me as well. Lots of the team knows about me. Is flowcharts really help visualize either this process you want to create an SOP for, or the steps that it takes to creating a resource, or the user experience for the resource as well. It helps really provide a super high level understanding of what steps it will take to either enter information in the resource or complete the resource, or what steps need to be done to create it, period. The research that needs to go into it, or for the SOP, how are we going to format this? What are we going to look like? It helps take everything that's out of your head, especially as an operations person. There's a million things flowing around in my head when I think of an SOP or a resource, and helps me visualize it and clean it up as well to a really simple understanding, so that the user also has a simple understanding too. It helps get rid of the complexities as someone who's already super operationally focused, to break it down so that anyone could understand it. And I think a flowchart is a great way of helping with that, and helps to visualize what you want from start to finish.
That is so awesome. What tool would you recommend? Because I know some people might be going, "Oh my gosh, we need flowcharts. That's such a great call." What tool would you recommend to be putting those together? I know there's probably lots, but just what are a couple that maybe would be good for someone to look into?
So funny enough, I use Google Slides a lot. There are a lot of flowchart makers out there, and they can be great, but they've almost been overcomplicated. Where Google Slides with just some shapes and some arrows, super easy to throw together, and super easy to move around. There's another one called Lucid Chart as well that I really like.
Mhm.
That's a well-known one. They have like a paid and a free version, but even the free version is really helpful. Flowcharts, you don't want to overcomplicate it. You really see a bunch of bubbles and arrows directing you places. So don't overthink it. A Google Sheets or a PowerPoint slide will do you well. Just do you
Oh,
well
yeah,
enough.
that's a great tip because the Google Slides is one probably someone wouldn't think of, like wanting to go to an actual flowchart tool, but
Mm.
if it works the same and it's cheaper and more accessible, it might as well. That is awesome, Aiden. This was such a great episode. I'm so glad we had you on. We are going to have you on again very soon, which I'm very excited about. And thank you all so much for listening to today's episode. Hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week and go be awesome.